star on the site of the castle.
And it was the first time the Beatles had really stopped being semi-professional almost.
Look at that. Absolutely fascinating. That's what you do. You buy these clothes that cost money and make a difference in it. But we never do that.
Never complains, gets up, gets on it, with a smile on his face.
You just want you to sit in your chair and go, hip hip hooray, for the Western press and the Western narrative. You dare dictate me the same old, every single day, without this. If you haven't seen it before, please watch the first series, the first 2 episodes, the second series. Stallone.
Hello everyone, I couldn't find a little, I ate this mouse, and I'm freezing again, on this bloody thing. Nevertheless, welcome this morning, and I've got 2 guests on to talk about films. I've got the great Anthony Brown, the international artist, me mate. He shouts at me all the time, and there he is, Anthony. Are you let me?
Good morning, thank you.
Are you okay this morning?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
And we've got Derek on, our music man, the music man himself, Derek Shelmerdine, who knows loads about films and directors and actors, and he's unbelievable. He knows producers, he knows line managers, he knows dolly people, bring the little dollies up as the moving pictures. Yeah, he knows everybody, this fella. And there he is. Hey, Eric.
Hello, Jimmy.
Good morning, Derek.
Lovely Saturday morning.
Oh. Do you know what? I've just had my windows cleaned. And the fella, I live up, right? The fella doesn't come around with a ladder. He's got one of those big, long things with a roller on. And that's what he does from the floor right up. And he's doing it. I said to him one day, I said, why don't you just come in and, open? And can't do that, he said. I'll have to do everyone's. Anyway, so what's been happening? Have you been watching some films for us?
Yeah, absolutely. You suggested 3 films last time, Frank. Family Man, Knowing, and The 12th Man. And all absolutely superb films. All very, very different genres, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. 12th Man, a tale of real courage and determination with a guy... Norwegian saboteur, basically, evading capture. The whole film's about him evading capture as he tries to get across to Sweden. An absolutely incredible film. And Knowing as well, I thought that was a great film. Basically, starts with a school kids time capsule. What will the world look like in 50 years' time? And 50 years on, when it's opened, one little lad opens his envelope with each of the kids in the class were to paint a picture or draw a picture of what they thought the world would be like in 50 years. And this little lad, Nicolas Cage's son, opens his, and it's just a series of what appear to be random numbers, and it turns out they're anything but random. And the whole thing's about determinism, predestination versus randomness in sort of world events. Absolutely fabulous movie. And Family Man I enjoyed as well. Sort of set at Christmas, well, starts Christmas Eve, and it's about a guy who gets a glimpse of what life would have been like had he married his girlfriend. Basically, it's a bit more complicated than that, but again, you know, very much in the vein of Scrooge, another Christmas film. It's a Wonderful Life, another Christmas film. All taking a look at what the world would have been either without them, or if a different set of a parallel universe, if they'd done something differently. And I thought they were all, in their own ways, absolutely superb films.
And that's the way it is, because they're so different in every aspect, so different whatsoever. And as you said about knowing, now my take on knowing is today, you know, since bombs were invented during the First World War, right, since then, and right through that century, right, and you know, to the quarter of this century, the testing from atom bombs to hydrogen bombs to nuclear bombs, and they're destroying the ozone layer. That's besides ordinary conventional bombs. They're destroying the ozone layer. And where you see that solar flare, it penetrates and goes right through the ozone layer and destroys the earth. And that was the key to me. That was the key. That's the way I looked at it. A fantastic film, as you said. You know, predestination of you know, the future of man.
Yeah,
the future of.
I mean, the film opens, well, not opens. When you get to the 50 years on, Nicolas Cage, he's a astrophysicist lecturing at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, giving a lecture on whether, you know, life evolved on Earth basically just by accident because a whole series of things came together, or if there was some grand plan. And at the end of that, he almost sort of mutters, he's going out the door, well, I think it's all random. He'd fallen out with his father, who was a pastor, and they hadn't spoken for years. And at the end, there's obviously a reconciliation. And he says, I can't actually even remember why we stopped talking. And what's interesting is his personal journey from life having no meaning. Basically, events were just random and happened because of a set of circumstances, and the next event happened because of a different set of circumstances. And what the sort of original protagonist, a girl called Lucinda, the little girl in the 1957 class who wrote the numbers. What the numbers were the date, location, and casualties of world events like the Titanic, for instance. Although it happened.
Yeah. Wasn't it really, really good about how they put it together? It was a very clever film. How they put it together, and each and every one was a disaster. Yeah, and you could see the disaster, you know, unfolding as the character Nicolas Cage. Now, don't forget about the religious aspect of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, when he lost his wife, remember when he said to that girl, he said, "When I lost my wife, I never felt anything." You know, to tell me, I always expected, because of, he doesn't mention God, but this is what he means. You know, I never felt anything. I thought God would have told me that my wife was in danger or something. Yeah. And that's why he turns away from religion and his dad. And that was the whole aspect of, you know, there is a heaven and there is a hell. When he
Yeah,
just,
it's interesting they used the purge by fire. I mean, the final scene basically goes back with his family, his father, and mother, and sister to their house. They all embrace, and then it cuts to basically this ball of fire destroying, New York, destroying San Francisco, just destroying everything in its path, and that is so religious across so many religions, cleansing by fire. I think Revelations, it's from a Christian point of view. It's in there, and many other religions use the cleansing of fire to purify what's going on. The one question that came to my mind very much was that's very much what it's saying. The film is saying that life is preordained in terms of these things will happen. They can only happen if there is a sort of grand plan of someone else, as it were. But what was interesting, the film never explained why. And I came across, I formed this one particular theory because what happened was that Nicolas Cage's son, and the daughter, essentially of the original girl who wrote the numbers, the prophecies. She had a daughter who had a daughter, and they become the other stars of the movie. And the end of the film, just before the end, basically, the little girl originally in 1957, when she was writing all these numbers down, she didn't get a chance to finish her picture.
no,
And then it cuts. Basically, you see them unearthing the time capsule. And she's not in the crowd. She was very much seen as a loner in the short time she was in the film. And she was standing holding a balloon. And then it cuts to the digging up of the time capsule. And then it cuts back to where she was standing at the back of the crowd. And the balloon's going up in the air. And something's coming because in the far distance is a shadowy figure who is the bad guy, as it were. And then they find the girl. They go looking for this Lucinda. She's about 14 years old, 13, 14, I think. And she's locked herself away in a cupboard. And then it shows her fingers are all bloody, and she'd been scratching. I couldn't make it out at the time because it's the beginning of the film. I didn't understand the relevance of it. But she'd been scratching more numbers into the wooden wall, and this turned out to be the final destination of what was going to happen. And long story short is Nicolas Cage gets together with the daughter. And they go to the mother's old house, and they lift up the bed, and scratch across the whole of the bed is everyone else.
Everyone else. They thought it was numbers, didn't they? 33.
That's right.
They thought it was 33, because of all the numbers, and it wasn't. It was everybody else.
Else.
But I think the moral of the story as well, right at the very end.
Yeah.
The picture of Ezekiel, the prophet.
Yeah.
Ezekiel, he said that Earth's going to be destroyed by fire. That's what he said. And when he described the, how can I put this? This is Ezekiel himself in his prophecies. He described these people who came. And Ezekiel was actually brought in one of their crafts. He said that he called them chariots. This is not in the film, by the way. He brought this Ezekiel, this prophet, to a place where there was a war going on, between warring factions. And instead of taking like a donkey rides or whatever, 5 days, they were there within 5 minutes, this chariot. And he described them as, he never said, in his prophecy, he never mentioned spacemen or anything like that. He just said that they were these beings. And that's how, at the very end, in today's religion, you've got Los Angeles, haven't you? In America, Los Angeles, the city of the angels. And we talk about angels. You look at all these like medieval pictures of I'm fascinated by the likes of Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and others, where they're showing the heavens and what you've got besides this great figure of God, shall we say. You've got the angels around them, surrounding them. And then, at the end of this film, what you see, did you notice they were angels? And that image, the way they did that was absolutely fantastic. And that's when Nicolas Cage, I hope we haven't spoiled it for anyone, but it's still worth watching.
Oh, it's well worth watching.
When Nicolas Cage, he said, the dad said to, it's going to be all right, son. And he said, I know. Yeah. Because he believes now. Yeah. He couldn't believe it at first after his wife. And when he said to his son, you and I forever together.
Yeah.
And he says, we will be meeting your mother. Mm. But it's telling man as well. The end, I love the music at the end.
Oh, the music was very atmospheric. I mean, I've actually made a note of that in the notes that I took down, and the music was amazing. What I loved about the end as well is that shadowy figure at the very beginning. It turns out they're effectively aliens. And the little boy, the little girl, and two white rabbits, which I thought was interesting, they get into the spaceship. And then when the spaceship takes off, you see there's a whole fleet of spaceships. So the knowing story had obviously been repeated across many countries across the world. And I thought maybe what it was getting at, because it never said why the world was ending. And if it was predetermined, then there would be a reason why it happened. And I thought maybe what it was because, and I think at the end, I think it was probably Nicolas Cage that says, we're going to start, you must go, we're going to start again with the boy and Adam and Eve, as it were, a little boy and a little girl. They're about 12 or 13. Yeah. What made me think, but they haven't explained why. And I thought maybe what it was is because, trying to contact the aliens, we can't even get on with ourselves, since man's been invented. He's been, battling with the next village, battling with the next country, battling with the next continent. And it's just been a whole series of conflicts, basically. We just don't get on as a species. It's just, we don't. And maybe what it was is, the God, whichever God it is, of the world, maybe there are other gods as well, because these were obviously aliens from elsewhere. And maybe there are other gods who created other parts of the whole universe, as it were. And maybe the gods themselves actually get on. So they know that, no matter how different you are, your culture, your skin color, your whatever, it's possible to get on with everybody. I mean, there are obviously always going to be bad people and good people, but by and large, they're sort of getting on with everybody simply because we all exist. And I thought maybe the idea was that, the God saying, look, Earth, we've had enough of you now, right? Poof, off you go. We'll take a couple of you. We'll find another Earth. We'll start with you lot again and see how the human species can have a second crack at the whip. I mean, there's no implication of that in the film.
Yeah, I
was just really looking for why.
Well, my interpretation of that is that man is destroying what God's given them.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the likes of Adam and Eve. And also, you've got the connotation of Noah's Ark. As you said before, it's all around the world that these things are taken off at the very end, where they're picking up more children. And we are going to start again.
Yeah.
We are going to. And those little stones were symbolic, weren't they? You know, when you find the stones.
That's right.
What you
out the significance of the little stones. They were obviously important, and where they were, where the last thing the girl scratched was the safe destination when the big fire comes. But it wasn't safe because it was a big cave or something. It was safe because that was where the airship was going to pick up the passengers, as it were, and take off before the fire got that far. So there was no safe spot. But I noticed that was the spot where all those little black stones were, and but I never really because they appear throughout the film in a couple of 2 or 3 different scenarios, and I didn't really pick up a major significance of that apart from the fact.
I did, because what you've got when that fella goes, like, you know when the kids is playing football in the garden.
Yeah.
And the car pulls up.
That's right.
And, and he goes down to them. Now, don't forget, that young boy and that young girl have been chosen.
Yes.
They've been chosen. And what they were given, well, especially the boy, was a stone.
Yes.
It was a stone. That was the token of life.
Right.
That was the token of life. Because at the end, when you see the woman, the mother, and she was dying, and Nicolas Cage goes and sees her in the ambulance, and he unders her hand. And what does he find? The stone.
Yeah.
So she's been chosen as well. Now, at the very end, not the very end, like, but when you see Nicolas Cage, and after they go, and he just goes on his knees and starts crying. And what you see is all the stones, they're all up here, the stones. And then all of a sudden, when they disappear, the things, they just drop. All those stones are the survivors of children around the earth. These chosen ones, and also parents, good parents. Parents that'll keep the world safe. That was my interpretation of it. But as I said, the most important part of it, this is my interpretation, was the killing of the ozone layer.
Yeah.
And he had written a book, hadn't he, or something like that, or he predicted
it.
The solar flare could destroy Earth.
Yeah.
And that's what he says to the other physicist. He said, remember that paper I wrote? And he puts it up on the computer. And the other physicist says, you're frightening me. He said, it's going to happen.
Yeah, because the other guy kept first.
So you enjoyed it?
I thought that was a brilliant film. I thought it was really good. And I like things that make the question life as well. Randomness versus determinism. It's very, very fundamental thought. I mean, it's the tenet of, pretty much all, I would think, religions.
Yes. I'll just say hello to the people here. Callum, he says, I think he is, yes. Yeah, Callum. Play a mannequin challenge again. Well, I don't know what you mean by that, but mannequin challenge, I don't know. And Derek says, morning, Frank, Anthony, and Derek. And Ali, our Romanian friend, he's still over there in Romania. He hasn't migrated. And he says, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Ali. Good to see you. But this is what you've got. You've got wonderful films. And where you've got the likes of what we've just been talking about, knowing, you've got the 12th man. And as you said, it's all about courage. It's a true story.
That's the frightening thing about it.
So what did you think of that?
Oh, I thought it was an amazing story, basically. I mean, it operated again at various levels. And in a way, there's a link back to knowing as well, because a number of times in the film, it says there's a reason you survived and make sure it wasn't all in vain. And those phrases come up 2 or 3 times from different people. I mean, in essence, what happened was there were a dozen Norwegian commandos, basically. I mean, they were commandos, and they were going to. They had a mission. They were trained in Scotland, so the British trained them, and then they went to Finland to destroy some strategic objectives. But what happened was that when they were landing, they contacted the wrong guy, who was actually a Nazi sympathizer. And the Norwegian guy they contacted the Germans, and so the fishing boat they were about to land on was intercepted by a German vessel with lots of machine guns and the like on it. Long and the short of the beginning is that, though you don't really see the beginning till the end, is that the Germans then opened fire on it. Everybody abandoned ships. They got, I think it was 30 tons of explosive they were taking with them. So they set fire, they exploded that. So, the ship was no more. They all got ashore. Long and the short of it was 11 were captured. Well, I think 1 was killed in the return to shore. The others were captured, and Nicolas Cage managed to evade capture, although I think he'd lost a shoe, so he's running through snow. It's all snow and freezing water that he's going through, and he ends up with gangrene in his foot. So his ability to actually travel is getting less and less as the film's going on. So he starts off he's being helped by villagers.
But what did you think of the acting of that?
Oh, superb.
Wasn't he? And I'm sure he lost weight, during that film. I think he meant to lose weight simply because, in the story, the real story as well, he was starving. He was getting away. And what about the German? He was a typical, stereotypical, nasty Nazi, wasn't he? He was.
Wasn't he? He had this whole thing about nobody'd ever escaped from him before. And there was a nice little bit in the middle of the film when they hadn't found him, Nicholas. So the guy said, Himmler, of course, is directly involved in this. So you got reports going to Himmler. If they go to Himmler, they're going to Hitler. So they knew that, the eyes of the very top brass, as it were on them. And the fact that one had got away was a really bad thing. So they sent an official memo back to headquarters to say they captured all 12. And then it became evident he actually had got away. That didn't turn into anything significant interesting was that he started off running, and then some villagers gave him some skis. And then this German plane spots him, starts machine as he's skiing down the slope. Course starts an avalanche, which then he's covered in, and that breaks his skis. So then he manages to get onto the next set of friendly people, and people are then dragging him on a sleigh because his foot is really bad by now. And at one point around the middle of the film, he actually cuts off his blackened toes with his penknife, his knife. I mean, a little bit, and that's apparently all true. But what I did love was the Norwegian resistance, if you like, of the villagers who were technically resistance. I don't think they handed over to their Swedish equivalents because they were aiming for the Swedish border. And so it was a Swedish team that was going to take him across, and they agreed that they'd leave him, Nicolas Cage, under a rock, and then the Swedes would come and get him and take him across the border. Didn't quite work out like that. He spent 4 rock, and then the came to Nicholas to the Finnish guy and said, "Where is it all?"
You're saying Nicolas Cage there.
He was under that rock for a day, and the first rock, they'd given him some water and a potato, not much more. And at the end of 4 days, when they came to find him, realizing he was still there, when did you run out of food? And he produced this cube potato, no bigger than that. He said, "I haven't run out yet. I have a lick for breakfast, then I have a lick for lunch." And what was great was when he was under the second stone, all kinds of problems occurred. Like the German lookout posts on the border were in sight of each other. So, you know, getting through is not going to be simple. And they're dragging them along on this sleigh.
Yeah, this was really go on.
And, you know, blizzard comes, the weather breaks. You know, this is Finland, for goodness sake. You know, lot of snow, lot of blizzards. So they have to go back to shelter. Well, he goes back under a rock, and he's there for 10 days. And then it turns out they work out how to get him past the German posts across the border, and that's being towed behind a herd of deer, or they might have been reindeer, but you know, very much deer or some family member of deer. I mean, hundreds of them. It was, imagine an American cowboy film with cattle, herding cattle. It was like that. And what they do, they strapped his sleigh to one of these reindeer that actually knew the journey very well. They said, "Oh, he knows this reindeer knows the journey very well. He'll take you across. He won't stop for anything," and he didn't. So the gallop all starts, and he's being dragged through. The Germans can't really see him because there were literally several hundred, I think, animals stampeding. And then you can see there are various rocks there, and you know, it doesn't look as you can just see something's going to happen. And it does, and basically the rope becomes disconnected from the reindeer. The sleigh turns. Now, of course, he's in full sight of the German lookouts. So 3 Germans head out in his direction, and the reindeer sort of comes back, and he somehow manages to secure the sleigh again. He's got 1 bullet left in his pistol, and he fires that, and the reindeer charges off, and basically that's it. It takes him over the border, and that was the 63rd day from the day that they landed, according to the film.
It's so full of courage, a true story.
Yeah,
and
the little girl writes the map, draws the map. Amazing.
Oh yeah, and you know, this is the beauty of films. This is the beauty of films. And I was just glad that Hollywood wasn't involved.
Yeah.
I was so glad Hollywood wasn't involved, because they would have like meted it up or whatever, leaving, you know, you to say and me to say and Anthony to say. That was far-fetched. That's the way Hollywood works, you see. But this was a Norwegian film, which gave the true aspect of what was happening with this man, this very, very brave man, you know, to escape certain death. And as I said, you know, those typical stereotype Germans that you see in all films. And as you mentioned as well about Himmler. Now, this fellow was determined to get him, simply because he would have loved to have said to Himmler, "You've got him."
Yeah.
Got him. You see, whether...
vendetta. At one point, because what happened, that he escaped, and he essentially escaped by swimming across, it's salt water, so probably sub-zero temperature, certainly wouldn't be much a height.
And it was real snow.
Yeah. Oh,
it was real temperatures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I mean about this actor.
Yeah.
You know, if it was Hollywood, it'd be all false snow and CGI and everything else, you know, the snow. Not this fella. Not this man. He fought, he filmed in natural conditions. Yeah. And I'm talking freezing conditions as well. When he was in the water, you could. Did you feel the cold yourself when he was?
You could see the ice, starting to freeze, as it were. I mean, it just felt cold. I mean, at one point he's carried, because now he's on the sleigh basically, so paddling across is not going to be good. So this big fisherman guy or big guy gets out this fishing boat and carries him to shore. I mean, it's the bravery as well of those villagers and people knowing that there's one of the farms searched 4, 5, 6 times, and you know, when he was hiding out, and I mean, he was in sight. The Germans actually were in sight of him on a number of occasions, but just didn't realise it.
And they were young people as well, you know, they weren't like older people in the villages when they were approached by the Germans.
Yeah.
You know, that was certain death if they told the Germans lies.
God, yeah.
They were just being put up against the wall and shot.
Yeah.
No questions asked. And that was the way it was. And they were very brave.
Yeah.
The Norwegians, they were very, very brave.
Yeah.
So, okay, that was sorted.
Oh, just one thing on that. The one thing I did love about it was the password for Under the Stone. The first time he said, because left by the Finns to be picked up by the Swedes, he said, well, the password is hello, gentlemen. Gentlemen? Gentlemen, says Nicolas Cage. Me, a gentleman. And I thought that was a lovely touch.
Okay, you mentioned Nicolas Cage, he wasn't in it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. He's in the films. He was just about everywhere I've been watching in the last few days. Yeah, no.
Well, I'm going to mention him now.
Yeah.
So the Family Man.
Family Man. I thought that was a great film. Well,
it was a great film because, as you see, he's going away to university, isn't he? But he's going abroad to university.
Yeah, he's going to London
to study economics, right? Business and economics. And then, yes, he says, I'll be back. And she was a lovely girl, and she was crying, wasn't she? She was crying. Yeah. What got me, I'll just say hello to these lovely lads here. TW, morning Frank and friends. Hey, I'm working today, but I have the pod on in the background. Really enjoying the show today. You'll never walk alone. Oh, thank you, T. And IBR Stella. Morning, Frank and assistants.
We're the lovely assistants, mate.
Morning, Frank and assistants. We all need assistance, to be honest. That was great, that. What a little comments and assist. But anyway, the Family Guy, right? And that was the start of it. And you see this beauty. He's living in a penthouse. He's living in a penthouse, and he's got this lovely girl. And the lovely girl, he said, well, is she? And she said, I might come and see you at Christmas. He said, okay, Anyway, she goes off. She's got this, very expensive coat on her. And then he goes to work. And then he's the chief of all this office, He's like a vice chairman sort of thing. Young.
He goes up at the CEO level, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And lots of money. He's doing all these deals. He was a great man.
Yeah.
Until, he's going home, isn't he? And he calls in to this shop.
That's right.
And that was the beginning of it, really. He calls into this shop on his way home. And there was that fella with the lottery ticket.
That's right.
And when he's got it rolled up or something like that, and he steps in, you could tell that albeit that he was a ruthless businessman, he was a good man as well.
Well, he was trying to placate the situation. The shopkeeper was taking a interview with this guy and his lottery ticket, saying it was false. And Nicolas Cage sort of stepped in to try and calm it down. And then Nicolas Cage is then walking down the street with the guy, the altercation guy. And the altercation guy says, everybody needs something. What do you need? And Nicolas Cage says, well, I've got everything I need. So the altercation guy looks at him, looks at his fruit juice bottle carton, and says to him, you've brought this on yourself. And what happened, basically, he went home, and then he woke up on Christmas Day in a completely new life. Basically, what had happened, it was 1987, supposedly, when he was going to fly out to London. The girlfriend begged him to say, so I've got a really bad feeling about this, and you think you're into a final destination situation. And she really wanted him to stay. he went off, and when he comes back, like present day, 13 years later, he's now, as Frank said, this very, very successful city type businessman. Then in the middle of a massive merger, and then he wakes up next to his girlfriend, like 13 years. What was his girlfriend at the airport? 13 years old. A dog comes and licks his face. He's got 2 kids. He's living in suburbia. I mean, as opposed to this multi-million Manhattan style house flat. And he can't believe, and it starts with like his mum and dad, or her mum and dad coming in for presents. He said, "Where's my Ferrari?" VW. So it's great. And what's really good is everybody around him in this new life knows everything he's done for the last 13 years, because he's lived that life in that being married, having kids scenario, and everybody knows that story. He wakes up in that story. He has no idea. He has memories. He has no idea where he works. So what happens? He looks at his Ferrari. He jumps in this old banger, drives to his apartment to go in, because you've seen him go to his apartment as a janitor kind of guy. And of course, this is Christmas Day, and the guy doesn't recognize. I want to go get my apartment. He said, "Who are you? Get out, get out!" And so he drives to his office. And again, you know, the at the door, he says, "I need to go. Look, I'm whatever his name was in the film." And he said, "I'm CEO." And he points to the board. There's a board there with all the various senior management names, chairman or whatever he was, and it's a different name. So then he sort of takes a step back, and he goes back to the house, now realizing that, wow, what's going on? Because what the guy said to him he's seen, so he sees the altercation guy again who'd made the transition. I said, "What's going on? What's going on?" "Well, I can't tell you." Which is, "How long will it be?" "Well, I can't tell, as long as it takes." Kind of conversation. He gives him a little bicycle bell, you know, ting 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 ting. No explanation of what it's about.
But did you notice? Did you notice the way Nicolas Cage was acting? You mentioned that particular. You know, excuse me. The expressions on his face when he wakes up, you know, and you see the kids, you know, and he's looking at her. It's like a bad dream too. And the acting of that child, that little girl,
very much like
she should have got a little Oscar for that. She was absolutely amazing. An amazing
she was brilliant. Because when he rang the bell, the little girl appeared on a tricycle ringing her bell, and she said, "You're not really my daddy, are you?" No. "It's my daddy." "Well, you're right, he'll be back." And she was the only one in this new life who actually
she knew. Yeah, she knew. And it shows you what I got from that particular relationship between him, and it was his daughter. No matter how you look at it, it was his daughter. But she realised that there's something wrong with her dad. And she knew, "You're not my dad." It's not like, "You're not my real dad." It was, "There's something wrong. You're not my dad." But she knows, inside her, she knew that he was a dad. If you know, I know that sounds strange, because she was just kept away from him. If that wasn't her dad, she would have just kept away from him. But she was loving him all the time, because she was looking after the baby when he was changing the nappy.
Yeah,
it was
that was brilliant. The baby,
so funny. She was helping him. She was helping him to come to terms with what's happening.
Yeah. And when the altercation guy actually talking about the new life, he said, "I'm going to give you a glimpse."
Yeah.
So it wasn't actually real in the way that Scrooge wasn't actually real. It was a glimpse of what might be. So none of those characters actually existed. They existed in a parallel universe, Basically, what was interesting is he was a tyre salesman, and she
That's what I was going to say. Hang on, Derek. Can I just bring Anthony here?
Yeah.
How are you listening to Derek and myself? How are you taking this in, Anthony?
I am regretting that I've missed 3 billion films that I'm going to catch up on.
I'm made up with that. I'm made up. That's why I asked you. Go on, Anthony.
I've been reading a lot recently about the Nostradamus predictions, and there's a Bulgarian lady who died in the 90s, who too followed on the predictions. Interesting to hear you talk about the film, Derek, about this. How do we resolve this oncoming tragedy for mankind, obliteration? And it's like Nostradamus and the like don't give any answers. They just say, unless this is going to stop at this age, and this is going to start, and this is going to... There's no kind of God-fearing kind of shine on it to say, but if we all do this, we can change it. It just is what it is, which is quite, when you read about it, it's quite daunting, really. And what you were describing in that film, which I'm sad not to have seen, but if we speak tomorrow, I'll have seen it tonight. It's like it gives hope to that, the years of predictions and knowing that we're in for something catastrophic.
You've hit the key word there, Anthony. You've hit the key word, because those 3 films, we're carrying on about, we're going to carry on about The Family Man. But you hit the key word by hope. Each film was hope.
Yeah.
Each film. So I'll just say, Paul Turner. Morning, Frank, Anthony and Derek. I hope you are all doing okay. Yes, thank you, Paul, for coming in and showing us and allowing us to be in your domain, talking about films. And we've already spoken about 2, but we're speaking now about Family Man, which was a very clever film. And it's about what might have been, because at the very, I'm not talking about the very end yet. I'm not talking, and it's what life. I think Anthony and I have spoken about this, and what paths you take in life. You can take one path, you can open one door, you can open one gate, and you can either go down 1 or 2 paths. You can take the righteous path, or you can take the path that leads you to, shall I say, I'm not saying disaster, it doesn't, the wrong path, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
The righteous path and the wrong path. We're professional people, and the lads on the chat as well, they're righteous people. And what we do, what we've done in life, we've achieved something. At least we've achieved something. Derek has achieved his writing, his love of music. He's put everything together. He's put everything. Anthony, he's an artist. He's put everything together too, in his form of professionalism. And he just doesn't he just doesn't pick up a pencil and starts drawing or anything. He's being inspired by other people, other great artists going back in time. And I know one of his great role models in the art world is Leonardo da Vinci, and the likes of Derek, you know, he looks at music, and this is just my opinion about Derek and about his professionalism. Everybody, I'm not saying everybody, but you know, most bands have been inspired by the Beatles because they changed music. Elvis before him and Sinatra before him. So, you know, there's other different genres of music. But I think that to inspire Derek, I think the Beatles inspired you because there's so much to talk about the Beatles. But in different, you can talk about the Beatles, whereas some Americans can talk about the Beatles, but in a different narrative.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, you can say something different. Even Anthony's a musician as well, besides a bloody artist. No, I didn't mean to say bloody artist. I mean, you know, we can all speak about or talk in different narratives trying to explain about the Beatles. You see what I mean? Now we're talking about films, and films do inspire us. And I'm only saying that, you know, for the chatters, you know, well, who are these fellas? You know, what do they give? You know, what kind of backgrounds do they have? Yet, I asked Derek to look at 3 films, and I was made up that he says, you know, he was superb because I've mentioned films on here and no one's watched them. I think only Paul Turner has watched a couple, you know what I mean? But that's the way it is. So getting back, Derek, I hope I haven't assumed wrong, you know, about like the Beatles inspiring you, you know, to write about music and things like that. But getting back to the film.
Okay.
Getting back to the film.
Meanwhile, back at the plot. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting in this new life is they're very sort of lower middle class, as it were, middle class kind of, live in suburbia in a nice but not particularly expensive house, drive nice but not particularly expensive cars. She's a pro bono lawyer earning next to nothing. He's a tire salesman. I think her father owns the business, is how that all sort of...
Tires. But don't you think when he goes into the place, I just...
Oh, where's my office?
Loads of tires. You know, it was the way, it was his expressions. He was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
So
he really portrayed the fact that he was lost in a new world. The first time he walked into the office, he knew the guy who ran it. It was his father-in-law, I think. And he turned to one of the sales guys and said, "Have I got an office here?" Because he was the sales manager, I think. He says, "Yes." He says, "Where is it?" He says, "Round the..." Absolutely. And as you say, Nicolas Cage really portrayed the fact that he was completely lost. Because what was beautiful was he had no sort of embedded memories of this past. He had been literally parachuted down into it. Everybody around him knew the backstory because they'd all lived it in their minds for the last 30 years. And I think, I wouldn't say it was Nicolas Cage's best ever film, but I mean, he was really good. And what was nice then, across the middle of the film, you can see that he's gradually re-falling in love with his wife. There are several quite touching scenes when he tells her how beautiful she is. He was growing up with his kids, even the dog that used to lick his face to wake him up, which he wasn't too keen on at the beginning of the film. Yeah. And you know, I think that's the whole point of the film. And when the altercation guide said to him, you know, there's no particular time frame. When the time's right, it will sort of end. And I think the little girl says to him, "I think you're back, Daddy." And then the sort of ring bell goes again, and the altercation guy, you know, the guy that made it all happen. And what's interesting, Nicolas Cage knows he's coming, and he's saying to himself, "I'm not going back. I'm not going back, because he loved his new life, even though he didn't have the wealth that he had before. He had, things that later on in the film he explains what he's missing when he goes back to his old life. And basically, the altercation guy then, so he sees the altercation guy. He says, "I'm not going back. I'm not going back." Anyway, the next thing, he wakes up and it's back to Christmas Day. It's a bit like the Scrooge one. It can't still be Christmas Day. And it was. And the woman from the very beginning, there's a knock on the door. So he's now back in his penthouse. He's now back with his Ferrari. He's now back as a multimillionaire CEO of a big company, finance company. And the film opens with him lying in bed, his new bed, or his old bed, if you like. And the door goes, and he opens it. And there's this lady, the lady.
Yeah.
And she's got a coat on. She opens a coat on. She's got this very flimsy negligee on. And basically, I've come to give you a happy Christmas kind of thing. And he really didn't want to know at all. I thought the final then part of the film was really quite touching. I mean, he then gets in his Ferrari.
Yeah.
And he goes to the house that he'd been living in with his wife and family. Of course, they had no idea who she was, because, of course, it didn't exist. It was 2 weeks in a parallel universe, basically. And what was interesting, going back to the old life, he was a car salesman, so he had the gift of the gab. And his one of the senior managers or his boss from the time when he's really rich brings his Rolls Royce in because the tire had blown. So he's now changing the tire of his boss, if you like, from the previous.
His previous.
So he talks him into, and he explains about the merger, because he knows all that's going on about the merger, because that's where his brain is. And the guy says, "Why don't you deliver the car yourself?" So he goes in, and then he's having a meeting with this senior guy and another guy who used to work for him, who was a bit flaky, a bit good, but not that good at his job, as it were. And now he is the sort of second in command there. So the two of them are interviewing him. And one of the things that was really interesting is when Nicolas Cage is in his role as CEO, senior manager, very important rich guy, this guy's working for him. Now we're in the second life with his wife, and he meets the guy again. The guy's got a completely different personality. The guy now warns him, "Don't you try and get a job here. I will scupper your chances of getting a job here." And that guy has a completely different, much more assertive personality. And I thought that was interesting as well.
He couldn't make
his influence, like It's a Wonderful Life, his influence on the guy hadn't existed. So he hadn't been dominated by Nicolas Cage, and he developed a completely different character.
But he couldn't make decisions, that fella, could he, really?
That's right.
He's relying on the character of Nicolas Cage to make decisions. Do you remember when he has to shout for him when he comes in on Christmas morning and about the merger? And they were made up that, he came in and he gave them he said, "This is what we'll have to do."
Yeah.
And they were made up. Now, as you said, with him not being out the picture, if you know what I mean, Nicolas Cage, he's more, as you said, assertive in every possible way. And he wasn't afraid to, give out an opinion or his sort of business acumen. Whereas before he was afraid in case he would have got it wrong. But now, he's more, as you said, assertive in every possible way.
Yeah.
The point of the film as well.
Absolutely. And I think a big important line comes shortly after that as well. When he goes back to his new life, he's now in the middle of this merger. This merger is going horribly wrong. And so what are we going to do? Nicolas Cage says, "We're going to do this, this, and this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to fly out to Aspen or somewhere. It was certainly a skiing area, and have a meeting with the people." And somebody asked him, I think the guy asked him, "What are you going to do after the meeting?" "Well, I'm going to go skiing for 4 hours." alone, utterly alone. And you can see, he's now remembering back, because he's got total recall of the, so to speak, of the other life that he had. And you can see that his reaction was, as opposed to before, when he was very much alone and very rich, could do anything he wanted. What he's realized is there's more to life than money, basically. And he says, well, I'll go skiing alone, utterly alone. And it doesn't mean anything to the people around him, but it means everything to anybody watching the movie. Oh, the other thing we haven't mentioned is that right at the very beginning of the film, well, not the very beginning, when he goes back to the present day, he gets out of the blue a phone call from his ex-girlfriend, the one that pleaded with him at the airport in 1987. It's now
to fix some stuff up.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't know that, and he decides not to return the call, and then he goes back to his new life. But what he decides to do now, of course, is return that call. What was really interesting, what it was, she, in this original life of Nicolas Cage being rich, she went off and became a successful business lady in her own right. And the reason the telephone call was not to get together, but to give him a box with some of his old belongings back from presumably 1987.
One of the most important things there, Derek, when he went to see her, and she looked at him, and she was quite surprised. She said, "Oh, you haven't changed," and whatever. And when he's trying to talk to her, she said, "Oh, just move on."
Yeah.
I've moved on from that time. From the tears, from the heartbreak, from everything. Because she has an idea. This is the old crux of the matter.
Yeah.
She has an idea that he wouldn't return.
Yeah.
He'd return, but, won't return to her.
Yeah.
And as she said, I've moved on. You'll have to move on.
Yeah.
And, the fact, well, go on, carry on.
No, you're absolutely right. And what it was now, it's gone back to the beginning of the film, at the airport almost, with the boot on the other foot, as it were, because he now realizes that he wants her back. Because what you're saying is absolutely right, Frank. At the very beginning, when she's at the airport trying to persuade him not to fly to London, she says, "I choose us. I think something bad's going to happen." You're absolutely right. She felt he wouldn't come back. And that's exactly what happened. We don't really know that little bit, but that's basically what happened. So she's now flying to Paris to pick up the head of some department or some company in Paris. And so he flies to the airport, and you have that same conversation you had at the very beginning of the film. But this time it's him begging her not to fly to Paris. He keeps saying, well, let's just go and have a coffee. You can get a later plane. Let's just go and have a coffee. And the film ends with them sitting in a coffee bar talking. So you never know if they get back together. It doesn't really matter in a way. But
when you see him in the queue, and he's shouting over to her as she's about to go through to board the plane.
Yeah.
And he shouts, "We have 2 children."
Yes.
And you will love, he mentions the kids' names. Yeah. You will love her. You love her anyway, and all this, and and that starts to get, she starts to listen.
Yeah.
And then when he said, as you said, just have the coffee with me. You can always get a later plane.
Yeah.
See what I have to say. And then it ends. You see, that path he took by not returning, that path was still open to him because he was a good man.
Oh, absolutely.
He was a good man. He wasn't an evil man in any way. So he could have just gone back and woke up that Christmas morning in his own bed that he actually made for himself by not returning to the girl.
That's right.
And he didn't, because he realised, albeit that he was so successful in his life, what he'd been missing. And it's all about love.
Yeah.
It's all about children.
Yeah.
And he missed it so much. And his wife, obviously.
As in The Family Man, title of the film.
I want to cry now.
Yes. I tell you one thing I did think was rather sweet was when he didn't return, they both had very, very, very successful careers. Both were top of their trade, as it were.
Yes.
When they did get married, they had basically a humdrum, run-of-the-mill lifestyle, both in low-paying jobs. I'm not sure if there was an unintended model there.
But, you know...
Such a great film.
See, it's a comedy, is it? It's a comedy, like drama, you might as well say.
Yeah.
And
so I think he describes a comedy drama.
It's so funny. So, and remember when he says to her, you know, she doesn't. Do you know where she thinks he's cracking up? And he's saying, "Come on, look where I'll take you," you know. And he goes to that house he's going to buy or something like that, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And she's saying, "Is this what you really want? Is this?" But the other scene where he goes to that, where you mentioned before, "You're not going to take my job. I'll make sure of that." You know, the other fella, when he's talking to this fella, he's going to get back into what he knows best. And that's that type of business that he was so successful on the other side of the door, if you know what I mean. The other side of the door.
So I just say that sort of twisting the story when he's the tyre salesman, his old boss or certainly senior colleague comes in for a new tyre with his Rolls Royce because it just happened to have had a blowout. So it just happened to be outside where he was working. The guy didn't recognize him, of course, but he recognized the other guy, and he was immediately there. There's a scene where he's actually telling him all about the merger. How he's saying basically, you're a dove in charge of that. You need a hawk in charge of that kind of conversation. And then Nicolas Cage told his old colleague, you know, all the things he should be doing in this merger, which is why the guy invited him for an interview, basically. So he never lost any of that. And of course, he's still got all of the knowledge from his previous existence, which was it was really quite interesting.
Don't you think with that, with the blowout of the tyre of his old boss, right, or his other boss, shall I say, you bring in kismet, you bring in fate.
Absolutely.
There's lots of fate in that particular film, lots of it. And I believe in fate, actually. I've always believed in fate. It's either fate that you get or fate that you don't get. You know, you can grasp fate and hold it for that precious few seconds. And then, unfortunately, it dissipates. But sometimes it stays with you, if you know what I mean. And that's the beauty of films.
Yeah.
I've been watching can I tell you to watch another film? If you don't mind.
Which one's that, Frank?
And it's another very clever film. It's Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. Now they've done a few films together, but this particular film is called The Lake House.
The Lake House.
Yes.
Lake.
Yeah.
Okay. Should be able to find that.
Clever.
Yeah.
It's very, very clever, and it's a sort of a nostalgic kind of film. It really is. And there's another one, and it's like fate. excuse me, it's a sort of fate, kismet again. And what that's called, it's again, it's Keanu Reeves. I think he's a great actor, and he's made some fantastic films. And this particular film is called A Walk on the Clouds.
A Walk on the Clouds.
Yeah, Anthony had loved. Honestly, Lainey had loved that. Anthony,
Go for it, Frank.
the two of them, those two films, she would love, and the two cracking films, really good. Anthony Quinn is in the A Walk in the Clouds.
I like it.
Anthony Quinn, and he's an older Anthony Quinn, if you know what I mean. And it's really, really good. It's all about fate, really is. And again, fate again. In the other one, The Lake House. And Christopher Plummer's in that. Christopher Plummer, he's in The Lake House. So you've got strong casts in both films, and they're the two recommendations. And I tell you that I watched the film this morning, believe it or not. I know it sounds crazy. I watched the film and I thought, I'll watch this. And it's called Survivor. But it's it's hard to explain. And it's about, you just see like a husband and wife. And their two children, the two children are teenagers. One's just, it's his 13th birthday, and the girl is about 16, 17. And they're on board a yacht, so they're on a bit of a vacation or whatever. And they're in the middle of the ocean or whatever, if you know what I mean. And, it's all like little jolly things and, how nice it is and whatever. And the girl, the woman rather, the wife, she's on board the yacht, and she's looking at the water, it looks all inviting and everything. So she dives in, she's swimming around, and she becomes distress. It's distress, and she's screaming for help. Anyway, they get her out of the sea, the ocean. It's of the ocean. I don't know whether it's the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, if you know what I mean. I think it's the Atlantic because they mentioned Cuba. And she said the currents were funny, it's strange. It was strange. And that night, you see whales, blowing out the water, the way they do with the snout, blowing up water. And they said, it's very strange. It's very strange that, whales are here. They don't usually get here. Right, so that's one thing. And then the young lad, he says, Dad, look. Oh no, you see the young girl, and she's on like a laptop talking to her boyfriend. And he's saying, do you miss me? The way young do, the young. Yeah, I miss you. He said, what about you? She said, I get bored. With me mum and dad, I get bored with them. And my brother, And so but in the background, he's sitting on a balcony of his home or whatever. And you see darkened skies, because it's night when they're talking. But you see these like thunder and unusual, like lightning and thunder, the rumble of thunder right in the background. Then all of a sudden, atmospheric, whatever it was, breaks up the conversation that they're having. And she's going mad and whatever. But you don't see the fella after that because it's all about on board this ship.
Yeah.
And then something happens. Now, I watched this on YouTube, and I've got a sort of a beef with YouTube. Sometimes they black out or silence some language, if you know what I mean. You know, some dialogue. They black it out for some reason, and I don't know why. But also, like, a storm hits them. All of a sudden, this storm hits them. And it's inside, you see them inside, they're being tossed about. And then it goes silent. You know, there's no, I mean, the dialogue, no dialogue, it goes silent. And I'm sure that they cut out as well, excuse me, a scene, this particular scene, because the next morning, you know, you see them getting out and everywhere's wrecked. You know, on the yacht, everywhere is wrecked. I'm not giving away the thing. I'm not giving away the full story. And you see, and he looks out, the dad, and he goes up on board, and he goes, and then they all come up, and they're all you're seeing is them looking, and they've all got a surprise on the face, you know, because they're looking around. They're looking around. And what it is, the ocean's gone. The ocean is completely gone.
Wow.
And what you have like what's at the bottom of the ocean. And they're on like a sort of a mountain. But a mountain below the sea, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see dead fish, not dead fish, fish flapping about, you know, on board the on the yacht. So the oceans have completely disappeared. But did I mention, I'm sorry, did I mention about meteors or whatever they are coming out of the sky? The kid, the young lad goes, look at that, Dad.
Oh, right.
You know, before the storm. And you see these meteors coming down out of the sky. And then, as I said, the next morning, but they must have cut a scene out. Because you just see it wrecked, you know, the tossing and turning, the violence of like the sea or whatever, the roar of the sea. So they must have cut that out. Yeah. And another mad thing as well, you see them speaking English, then they speak another language as well, you know. And I think it's I don't know. It's a strange film, but if you catch it, it's an unusual film. And a couple of surprises that hit you right away. A couple of surprises which surprised me. Whoa. You know what I mean? As the film's going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, it turns out to be a bloody French film.
Oh,
where
right.
it's English in one half and then French. Then a little bit of English again in another half. It's
strange,
but I think that you've got to persevere with it. But I had to persevere this morning with it. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I can tell you about, and it's just called, and you get it on YouTube. It's called Survivor. You get it on YouTube.
Is it a new film, Frank?
Yeah, it's new. Funny enough, it's 2024. It's a 2024 film. And, you know, they just threw it on YouTube. But as I said, it's a very unusual film to be both in, you know, if you can understand French, you'd be made up because there's a bit of a narration right at the end. But I haven't a clue. I don't speak French, unfortunately.
Is it not subtitled?
No, I never put subtitles on. It didn't even come on as subtitles. That was the strange thing.
Yeah, the thing would be subtitled if it's in two languages, in either one or
No, honestly, there wasn't no subtitles whatsoever. Most probably I could have got them on myself.
Just
But
to,
I don't know. As I said, it was. Can I tell you another film to watch, Derek? I think this is a brilliant film, and it's getting away from the genre of what we've been talking about, and totally. So you've got those three films for the next time.
We'll talk about Survivor next time as well as the other two.
No, do you know what I want you to watch? You could watch that Survivor, and it'd be good to review it though. See what you think of it. Because there's a very unusual ending. An ending that you'd expect anyway. But it's only, that's what I mean about surprises in that bloody Survivor. Yeah. Anyway, the other film I want you to watch, and it's on YouTube, which is, when I first seen it, this was made in 2007, and it's got a good cast in it as well. And I thought, when I watched that, I said, that's great, that's a really good film. And it's called, you'll get it on YouTube, and it's called 30 Days of Night. 30 Days of Night.
Right.
And it's about a town called Barrow in Alaska. And every year, when the sun goes down, it's just 30 days of night, a month of night, any day. And it's good.
Yeah.
When I watched it, it was very good. And I watched it again the other night, simply because, the way like you can forget things, and I thought, I wonder if it'd still be as good as what I first thought when I first seen it, and it was. It's very unusual, Anthony. You'd have to watch it on your own. I don't think Laney would like it. To be honest. So, you enjoyed today, this morning?
Me?
Both of you?
I have loved it because I'm learning. I love films, I love books, and and it goes back to that thing you said before about things leaving an impression on you. I like to be moved by stuff. Books, if you read a book, either you learn something or it's a brilliant story, and you think, wow, I didn't see that coming. And I like the same in films. Unfortunately, we're living in an age now where everything is streamed, and seems to be what you described today seem to be fantastic films, and I'm going to make it my business to watch them. But unfortunately, what we're given through the box in the corner of the room is not the same, really. It's a mixed bag of quality and copy and paste. So it's very rare, unless like you guys today have tipped us off to watch something, very rare that you get it on your TV screen.
I think you've got to look at films. Someone asked me, what type of films do I like? And what it was, I said, I've done, in all honesty, I've done 9 years of study, university, believe it or not, in and out of there and whatever. And to get away from the reality of things, I always looked at science fiction, two genres of films, science fiction and horror, just to get away. People say, why horror? I said, because I escape from what I'm actually doing.
Yeah.
I escape from it, if you know what I mean. All this study, at least it's got me away from, and it relaxes me as well. So
yeah,
it's like anything. It's like, people saying, just get, the reading or the watching the TV, and they need some sort of, I don't know about relaxation or whatever, but they get up and put the coat on and go out for a walk. But I watched horror films and science fiction films to get away from the reality of what I was doing, because study can affect you. You must have seen it, Anthony, and you must have seen it, Derek, with all the writing that you had to do. And you, Anthony, with, I remember you saying, it was only a couple of weeks ago, where you were working and you were going, I've got to get this right. When you were painting, you've got to get this right. And you were studying it, and it wasn't coming right for you at the time until you got it right. So, you must have had a break. You must have gone, I'm going to have a cup of tea, and got away from that for a moment, if you know me. Same as you, Derek. You could have been writing, say, like about the Beatles or whatever, and go, well, no, that's wrong. This is what happens, or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, often when you're because it's all factual, and one thing you learn about the internet is there's lots of great stuff up there, but there's a lot of contradictory stuff up there, and cross-referencing to make sure that you're as accurate as you possibly can be quite tricky sometimes. And sometimes you just can't get a clear definition. I remember when I was putting the Rolling Stones story together, I think it was the last one to join was Charlie Watts, and I never did find a definitive first date that he played with the band. There were several, from good sources, different dates. And again, from the Stones, I found two completely contradictory dates, one from the Stones website and one from basically the Kinks website. And that was the first day at the Marquee when they played for the first time as the Rolling Stones. At the time I was writing the book, I checked it out on the website, the Stones website, and it said that the Kinks, the guy that would become the Kinks drummer, Mick Avery, was the drummer that particular day. And then I was researching the Kinks, and I came across this website called Cast Off Kinks, and that was a tribute band made up of people who actually played in the Kinks. So people like Ray Davis, Dave Davis had appeared with them sometimes. And on that website, I found an interview with Mick Avery. And in the interview, he says, I rehearsed with the Stones once, but I never actually played a gig with them. So you've got the guy who was supposed to be there saying he never played there, and you've got another guy who was at the gig convinced he was the drummer. But I think the whole thing is, a lot of these things are 20, 30, 40 years ago. At that time, the Rolling Stones wouldn't have believed, even when they became successful, they wouldn't have believed they'd have more than 2 or 3 years. And what they certainly wouldn't have realized is they were living through history. I mean, Elvis had become famous by then, but in those days, there were no Elvises, there were no Beatles. There were just people like Fats Domino being famous for a bit, Chuck Berry had been famous for a bit, Cliff Richard had been famous for a bit. So, looking back on these things, it's no wonder that a lot of people can't actually remember the first time they played with bands in the late 50s, early 60s. And that can get quite interesting sometimes, trying to figure out what the story is.
Yeah, absolutely. I would. I mean, it's the same when, and my passion is through music and art and everything. But it's like when you're not looking for something particular, little bits of information pop up, I found a site, and I couldn't even tell you the name of it, which describes how Leonardo da Vinci, because he was accused of never finishing work, certainly towards the last couple of years of his life. And he'd had a series of strokes, which is not out there in the main media. And one particular stroke, his first one, kind of paralyzed his right hand. So he had to, his hand was held up, so he couldn't work on it, couldn't use it. But luckily enough for us, he was forever ambidextrous, so he could paint and draw with two hands, and that's why he could get some, mainly left hand. So that's why he slowed back from his work, and there's a various other people's, talk about the great man, and then bit by bit he would have had a series, as we know now, which would have been easily treated with one or two tablets. In those days, of course, there was nothing, and I think it took 5 years, and then the final one killed him, and it left me saddened. But also, it was like, how come I didn't know that bit of information before? It's like all these snippets of information. The good thing about the internet, I guess, these days, is that there's stuff out there. We just have to, make sure that the stuff out there is true, not fictionalized, Hollywoodized.
Well, again, when I said that I was studying, when I've studied very hard, I had to study hard. I've been all over the country getting the likes of primary sources. And when you get these primary sources, it does shock you. It really does. I was at the Bodleian Library in Oxford, and I had to look up something. And so as I was going through, I was talking about fate before, and as I was pulling through, I seen a document, and I was looking at it, and I couldn't work it out. So anyway, I got I forget what you call them, and he came and he looked at it and he went, "Oh yes," he said, "we have this in English, some part of English and whatever," but I couldn't understand. It was like Shakespearean thing, if you know what I mean, writing. And he said, "Oh, don't worry," he said. So he got me this like document, photocopy, but in English, plain English. And because don't forget, Shakespeare's plays had to be deciphered. Chaucer was the first fella to write in English.
Yeah.
Right? He was the first to write in English. So they all followed Chaucer after that, because everything was written in Latin. But they were still throwing Latin in it. You couldn't understand it really. Anyway, I got this piece of and I couldn't believe what I was reading. I'll show you. Which is, and when I studied this, I thought, definitely, this is true.
Yeah.
Now, you might think, he's just studied that little sort of document. I studied it. Which was, it got me actually. It got me about how corrupt governments are, cover-ups, if you know what I mean. Ever since then, have I trusted governments? No, never trusted governments. I've never trusted them, any government. any government that, because they want to control you. So they feed you with whatever they feed you with. And we have to go along with it. They are our employers. And people don't realise that. That's why we have a vote. Oh, we'll vote him and her, because these are decent people. They will look after us. No, they don't. They look after themselves. We become secondary to everything that we believe in. We're secondary. So anyway, as I said, I was looking at all this documentation, and remember, Anthony, I said to you, and I don't know whether I said it to you as well, to be honest, Derek, about the First World War. The only truth that you got out of the Second World War during the First World War was poetry. That's the only truth you got, because it was telling you about the horrors.
Yeah.
Rather than the patriotic stuff. It's like today, where if you speak out of out of turn to the government, they could throw you in jail. And that's like freedom of speech is gone.
Oh, it's gone.
And that's the same as the poetry in the First World War. Bang, bang, that was banned. And it wasn't published until 12 years later, after the war ended. 12 years, because it was giving you the horrors. They didn't think there'd be another war, but there was. So everything, what the government, if they want to control you and tell you not to say what you want to say, especially today, they can put you away. They can put you away. So the way everything, look at George Orwell. They called him an idiot. No, that won't happen. Even ourselves, that won't happen. But you've got visionary. He was a visionary.
Absolutely.
And everything he said. Look, can I say something here? I don't know. You might think I'm mad here. You might think I'm mad. Is that, do you know, there's a fella, and before I give you his name, this fella was lambasted in the press. They were saying that he was a geek. His mind is gone, and they were calling him for everything. And I didn't realise how many followers this fella has. And if he goes into a theatre, he fills it out. And he's in demand all the time. And he prophesies some things, and they've all come true. Except a few, which he says is going to happen in the future. And I was reading about this fella, then I was researching him. And then I got onto a few of the things, some of these lectures he was giving. And I said, he's right. He predicted this, that sometime in the 21st century, and he was talking about the 20th century and the Cuban Missiles crisis, where it could have caused a nuclear war, but it was averted. Right? It was averted by two men, and that was John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev. It was averted. So everything went back to normal, and, the Cold War was still going on. And this fella predicted, and he's going back to, I think it was 2005. 2005, he said, within 20 years, there'll be nuclear ships with nuclear arms and submarines, nuclear submarines around the coast of Cuba. And they'll be Cuban friends. He never said what nationality. He said they'll be Cuban friend. They're friends of Cuba. That's how we put it on. Friends of Cuba, not America, the enemy. Now, you've just started a vote in the United Nations about the condemning, not the condemning, but does every country in the UN to take away the sanctions and everything else that's been put on Cuba for decades. And everyone voted yes, take away these, except 2 nations. But this is what America's put on them, by the way, for decades. And 2 nations voted no. So they can't lift the sanctions because everybody's got to vote yes, lift the sanctions. And that was America and Israel, you see. And this fella predicted it. And he said that, and you know what? You know him. But David Icke.
Yeah.
Incredible what he's predicted, you know. It's all, he predicted a tsunami. Do you ever remember that tsunami that it's at a nuclear power station in Japan? He predicted that. He predicted Chernobyl. Chernobyl's in Ukraine, by the way. Well, it was the Soviet Union then. And he predicted that. He predicted it, all these things that came through.
I remember it seemed to be non-stop for quite a while. The lambasting he got through the media, through TV and through the papers, as you said, laughing at him, discrediting him, which is in history is how the establishment copes with threats, as they say. And the same thing happened to William Blake hundreds of years earlier.
You see, do you think all governments, no matter where you are, do you think that I don't know. I can't put it. I can't really put it into words about governments because, as I said before, I don't trust them. I really don't trust them. And when you get leaders, especially leaders that disregard everything that you're saying, and I'm going back to Columbus University in Ohio. Where they had the protesters, they were only the student protesters about what was going on in Palestine and save the Palestinians. And some of them were being locked up and beaten up by the police, heavy armed police. So what's that telling you? Is that telling you, listen, we're controlling you. How dare you come out and protest against something that we back? It's just absolutely nonsense. I'd love to say more, but I'm afraid that I get banned. I've been warned, you see. I really have. I've been warned about it. IBR Stella, look at this. He says, our politicians are traitors. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And he actually says, was that tsunami man-made? We were talking before, Derek, and Derek gave a great synopsis, summary about knowing one of the finest I've heard, actually, that summary what you gave, Derek. And it's about how countries are destroying the earth. It's not only on top of the earth, it's also beneath. It's in the oceans, the depths of the oceans, that these nuclear things were detonated below the oceans. So it's hitting the core. It's hitting the core of the earth is magnetic, and it's destroying it. I've got this thing, and it always gets me nose, itches me nose, and it's shocking. I just wish it. Anyway, this is why they're talking about global warming, because the core has been hit by all these things going on, but more so than the ozone layer. Now, the ozone layer is getting thinner and thinner over the years. And that particular film, knowing where the solar flare, see, the ozone layer, I freeze, I'm freezing, and I can't explain. The ozone, this is the ozone layer here. Look at this, look, it's fucking dumb. I freeze, you say. So the ozone layer is there. The solar flares that come to us every day, it's us. But it bounces off the ozone layer. Now, the ozone layer is thinned out that much that a solar flare, and it's just penetrating these little solar flares into us. The unfortunate thing is, once that thins out more, a solar flare will destroy Earth. And that's that knowing. And it's only was that tsunami man-made. Everything is man-made. We used to call them tidal waves. Then all of a sudden, they're called tsunamis, a Japanese word. And everything that you see is man-made. Everything. You've got the faults, haven't you? The Andreas Fault and the west coast of America. But that west coast of America, that fault goes right around the world. It goes right around, and they're opening it up. Each time it opens up, each time. And it got to Christchurch in New Zealand. Remember a few years ago, and Christchurch was devastated by a bloody earthquake. So, can I say that the man-made? I don't know. Well, but man is not helping to show them up, if you know what I mean.
Isn't he? So every time a bomb or a nuclear device is detonated, then there's got to be a reaction somewhere else.
Yeah, all the time. You know, from the First World War, when you had these bombs falling and shells and everything, 1 million men died. 1 million. Wilfred Owen said it's taken the cream of British youth. It's gone. The cream of British youth has gone because of the First World War. Then you had 1 million Frenchmen killed. You had 500,000 killed at Verdun alone. Verdun. You had them killed alone. And you had, I think, nearly a million Germans. But what killed them was the fucking, sorry to swear, was the bombing and everything else, and gas and everything was going on. And that destroyed the earth, the crust of the earth. Then you had the Second World War, which was, as it was destroying the crust of these bigger bombs, better bombs, and more weaponized. Then you had the 2 H bombs. A bombs, not H. You had the 2 atom bombs dropped on Nagasaki, but you had all the you had the tests before they dropped them. You had all the tests. And that was destroying it. Then you had the hydrogen bombs, and they had to test them everywhere. You know who's got nuclear power today. Then you had from the hydrogen to the nuclear. And then there was more tests.
Yeah.
So as it was destroying not only the crust of the air, but also the core, this big magnetic field that keeps the earth spinning. But it's also destroying the ozone layer.
Yeah.
And people don't realise this. People don't realise. And I'm not on an high horse or anything, but I am concerned, very concerned of what's happening today. Because you've got a lunatic who wants these. Look, there's a rogue power, a rogue country who's got nuclear power, and they're not supposed to have. And I'm afraid that they could, launch a nuclear attack on some certain country. I'm not mentioning who the country has who's got the nuclear power, but they have, and the Americans have known for years that these have got a nuclear power, nuclear missiles, and that particular country could easily set off these nuclear missiles at a certain country, and then the lot goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm afraid of now. I'm made up that my little granddaughter can play, read music and play the piano. I'm just made up with that because I see my little granddaughter, progress into something, like she loves the music, she loves playing the piano, she loves reading music. Will she ever see, the future where she can play the piano and read music as an adult? You see what I mean? It's just frightening to me.
Yeah.
It's just frightening to me.
I mean, just going back to George Orwell, wrote that book in 1948, and just about everything he talked about, double think, double speak, all the rest of it. I mean, we are living beyond it now. It's got a frightening thought, really. I think you're absolutely right about the whole nuclear thing. At some point, somebody, probably not one of the major powers, will, for some reason, lob one at somebody.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you know what I mean, because I don't know. It's so sad. When I've read over, the past, and I'm going back in history. When I've read like from the Romans, going right through, man has always. There was Thomas Hobbes in the 1600s, a great philosopher, English philosopher, and he came out and just said, and it applies today, it applies from his past as well, and his present, but it's also the future of what he said, when he said, man is nasty, brutish, and short. Short tempers. But what he's talking about are the leaders of countries.
Exactly.
Let's go to war.
Yeah. I mean, as you go around the world, you just find in conversation with people, the vast majority of people just want to get on with their lives.
Exactly.
Kids, they just want to go to work, come home, have fun. You've got a tiny percentage of people who are politicians who just screw it for everybody. But it's the same the world, and all political systems are ultimately. So, I mean, you imagine if somebody suddenly discovered that what a great world this would be if Europe, Russia, America, China, and India all just liked each other, or didn't actually wanted to just work in their own interests with each other. I mean, how difficult can that be?
Well, it's not difficult, but you've got a massive country called America who wants to rule the world. They want to police the world through hegemony. They want to, every country, they want, there's Venezuela, South American countries full of oil. And because they wouldn't allow the Americans to go in, they've sanctioned. Because the world's run by the dollar. But now what you've got a big alternative, which is called BRICS. And it's going to be, Russia and China, and there's other countries. Now you mentioned India and other countries who's gone into BRICS, and South American countries. And they're going to deal in a currency called the yuan, which is the Chinese currency. And this is why America wants to start a bloody war with China, because they're taking away now the dollarization. The dollarization's going. Really, it's not going to go overnight, but it will take time. But eventually, the dollar will be gone. It'll only be the West. I think some of the West as well. I think some of the West countries, and I'm talking about European countries, will join BRICS. The likes of Georgia, who they tried to overthrow only recently, last week. They're trying to put a puppet regime in there, and they won an election legitimately. And so did Venezuela. Venezuela and Maduro, they won an election, but the Yanks tried to overthrow that election by saying it was rigged. Yeah. Now you've just got, in America, I was looking at something, and they were showing Formula One racing the other day. Then all of a sudden, what came up, and it must have been leaked by someone, a chart saying about Kamala Harris in the lead. They just won, a state like, say, Pennsylvania or wherever. They've won that state by 52% or 48% over Trump. How come? The election's on the 5th of November.
I know.
It's shocking what they're doing. It's all, America is corrupt. They do not want Donald Trump in power. And there's two reasons why. They say he's a maverick, but they also say, he said, only 72 hours ago, I'm going to stop the wars in Israel, between Israel and whatever. I'm going to stop them wars. I'm also going to stop the war in Ukraine. I'm going to stop them. Now, the WEF, the World Economic Forum, they don't want that. Neither does the deep state of America. Neither does the neocons of America, because they're making billions out of the arms race. They're making absolute billions. And I'm talking about the politicians as well. I'm sure they're all in on it. They're making vast sums of money. The wealth of those politicians is incredible. The greed of it. So they don't want. So they trumped up charges, excuse the pun, but trumped up charges against Donald Trump. Where he's been in and out of court. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And he's been, the Supreme Court just said, oh, forget about that, this is ridiculous. And I was watching it until, I think it was 3:30 this morning, a debate between him and Kamala Harris. And she was trying to say about all these crimes. So, do you want him? He's a felon, convicted felon. He said, I'm not a convicted felon at all. She made a show of herself as usual. But this is how corrupt governments are. And they want the wars to keep going on. There's Gaza, young kids, young babies, little baby, a couple of days old being killed. You know, and they're saying it's a mass. I don't believe children are in a political frame of mind to say, yeah, give me a gun. A child, a 2-year-old baby who's in a mass. What's that all about? It's shocking what they're doing. And they're giving them these missiles. The British as well, British missiles to bomb tents. You've got the most corrupt. He's not even a leader. Zelensky of Ukraine. He's bought thousands of, not thousands, I'm exaggerating, but he's bought houses worth millions in this country, in France, in America, in Switzerland. He's bought all these houses, this fella. And it's not going to the people of Ukraine. It's not. It's going to him, and it's going back to America, because Ukraine is the biggest washing machine you're ever likely to know. All the money's being laundered that's going into Ukraine and going back to the Americans. It's filling the pockets of these politicians. And Raytheon, this massive, industry that makes arms, weapons of mass destruction. And that's where it's going. And it's shocking. And even David, I predicted that. He predicted about these manufacturers. He said they're going to make millions, billions. So, this is what's going on in the world today. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry to go on about that. But it's really annoying to me. It's really annoying. And we are, you can go back to these great writers. You can go back to the great painters of our time. And, Anthony's a painter. You're a writer, Derek. And you know about, I know about, I've got a library here full of books, full of, classics. And these wonderful writers, these wonderful poets, I love them. And they predicted the past as well, the future. They really have. As you said about George Orwell, look at War of the Whales. Incredible. H.G. Wells, War of the Whales. Think about that. And he predicted the time machine. He predicted, and this is long before a plane was invented. And he predicted planes and bombs and everything else in the time machine. Absolutely amazing. Amazing. So, are these science fiction writers the visionaries? They are visionaries. You look at Jules Verne and the submarine, the Nautilus, where that has a nuclear power thing, didn't it? It's going back. These are visionaries. And people take no, they just say, 20,000 leagues under the sea. Yeah, isn't that lovely? It's a story, but come on.
It's like dreams that came true. But it's like Nostradamus. I think one of his predictions for 2025 was that aliens would make themselves known and communicate. Well, that's kind of not, he's not the only one to have said that. And I don't know why, next year and not this year, but it's fascinating to think that these visionaries of their time, who would have been mocked and laughed at for the ridiculous stories with no concept to reality, are proven right now. And certainly George Orwell, God bless him.
It's can I just read a couple of things? He said, IBR, have you watched the interview from the HARP scientist describing how their weather weapon, get on to this, works? As he says, it's like playing a guitar to alter the magnetic field through vibration and frequency. That's what I've been talking about. And he carries on by saying the weapons manufacturers are owned by Vanguard / BlackRock, and we all know who owns them. And it's I can't really describe what it's all about. I really can't. And these people who are in control of the world, but you've got a rogue nation. I'm telling you right now, you've got a rogue nation who we all know who they are, and they've got they've got nuclear missiles where they shouldn't have, by the way. They shouldn't have, but they have. And I think that they could easily, and I mean easily, just press a little button. I'm telling you now, just press a dink. Be the end of us. Gentlemen, it's been fascinating. We've had a fantastic discussion.
Yeah.
And that fantastic discussion is we've covered films. And I've given you a little list to watch. When can you come on again, Jerry?
Yeah, probably about another month to be brilliant if that's okay with you.
Fantastic, because you'll be coming on the Monday, won't you? Talking music.
Yeah, yeah. And we've got 3 good films to check out as well.
Oh, just watch them, please. Please watch them.
Yeah.
You see, I like films, and those films are totally different.
Yeah.
Especially, I told you to watch 30 Days of Night, haven't I?
Yeah.
30 Days of Night, totally different from the other films that I've been telling you about. I really think it's been Adam Chris Smith. Best wishes, Frank and Guest, your history channel, the best on YouTube. Thank you so much. Thank you. You must have thought this was history. And Paul saying, I look forward to watching the Survivor film, Frank. Have a good weekend. Take care. At your own peril, Paul, watch Survivor. It's an unusual one, actually. As I said, it's just speaking in English, then all of a sudden it goes into their French or something. But they took out a scene, like a devastating scene, YouTube. And that's the worst about YouTube. They take out dialogue, they take out, scenes. Well, anyway, that's them. But you can still follow the film. You can still follow it. You can still follow it, to be honest. So, be interesting to see. I watched it this morning. I'm going, fuck, I hope this ends. That's why I was a little bit late. But Anthony and Derek and the chat. Look, Paul Turner. He said, have a good weekend, Anthony and Derek. And it sounds intriguing, but I have to give it a look. It sounds intriguing. He's going to look at it, so thank you. Thank you. And IBR, he says, adios, Frank, an amazing assistant. Amazing assistant.
Absolutely. This one I made earlier.
So, that's one of it. I forgot to mention this. The birds. And I think that's one of the best Hitchcock films he's ever made. And it's like nature, isn't it, turning against mankind. Think about that.
Yeah.
He's a great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Anthony, I'll see you on Monday. Derek, I shall see you. When are you coming on again on the Monday show?
Email Jason probably
Okay.
today. That'd be brilliant.
Okay, so it'll just be you and I, Anthony, on Monday. Anthony, I've got a talk over in that place again, you know.
Yeah, on the 9th, was it?
Is it the 9th? I'll have to have. Well, yeah. Is it next Friday?
Yeah, you've already told them you kind of.
Okay.
I won't divulge, but Lainey's looking forward to hearing it as well.
Is she? I think I wonder if Derek is would like what I'm talking about next Friday. I'm giving a talk.
Yeah.
What it's about. There's a big concern, and it's like a concern. She comes into the part of it, actually.
All right.
She comes into the part of it.
Yeah.
Because people might think about the gunpowder plot. But honestly, Derek, they don't. They don't, and that's what I'm talking about. And
All right.
this little gathering next week. Lunchtime, it's around lunchtime. Don't we, Anthony?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we get there like 2 seconds before showtime, and then yeah.
It's mad. Do you know, we had to get there, and Lainey, love Lainey. That's Anthony's wife, and she just drives us. Anyway, she put her, like that thing they use to get to places, turn left here and do it right there and go straight on. She put that on. And it wasn't working, was it, Andy? And we ended up lost.
No.
Lost. We ended up lost. So anyway, yeah.
There before, so we can't remember.
Yeah, but we got there anyway. We got there, which is great. So that's what I'll be talking about next week, next Friday. And they're nice people as well, aren't they?
Yeah, lovely people.
Just nice people. And we enjoy it as well. And sometimes we have a laugh, sometimes we don't. I don't know whether we'll be laughing next week anyway. But anyway, Derek, thank you so much. See you in a couple of weeks on the history show where you do your music. Yeah. And a couple of weeks after that with the film show and those films. I tell you what, you're first class, at reviewing.
Yeah.
You were first class. Yeah.
I really enjoyed.
I'm not just saying that. Honestly, I'm not flattering you. That was first class.
Oh, cheers, mate.
I'm made up with that. So we'll see you Monday, Anthony. See you there in a couple of weeks, Derek. Okay.
See you guys. Cheers.
And thank you, chat. See you all later on. I'm doing a post-match thing pod later on. So see you soon. Thank you.